in their investigation, and that individual was picked up at the Melvin Hall Airport yesterday afternoon and was transported to CID. That I can confirm for a fact. But as to the status of the body, the marks, these are mere allegations. It will be interesting, Matt, to find out the results of the autopsy. That will definitely tell us a lot. That is as much as I'm prepared to say on the matter right now.
All right, Kalaja Baptist, thanks for that update, but very, very interesting. I want to go back some time last week, Kalaja. We did a report on the jewelry case there. Of course, it was we asked a few questions as it relates to the jewelry and how much that the defense is putting up in terms of what is going on. I did do some further investigation, Carlisle, and I have to say, and I have to admit here this morning, that it is clear that these guys, whoever they are, sort of swiped that jewelry store at Jewelers International, and I have no doubt that 45 watches or more may have been taken. Based on my information and all my investigations, Carlisle, something, I think we may have alleged that there were not, all these watches in that showcase. But yes, after my investigation, I revealed, it revealed a lot more to me.
Yes, indeed, we did make that comment, and we want to retract what we said. We did not mean any malice in terms of the investigation, and so from what our further investigations led us to, it led us right into what would have transpired, and we are now more than ever convinced that just like what you said, Matt, there were more than the amount of watches, the 45, that is alleged to have been stolen. And so, we are more than convinced. We did all our investigation, further investigation into that matter. And because, some people in court, in fact, I did hear lawyers in court making that comment. And the prosecution was always saying to them, you just do not know. And so when the prosecution was saying to them that you just do not know, meaning that in fact there were 45 and more watches on showcase, we did our own investigations and we came up also with that very conclusion.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kali, for that. Any more stories surfacing at this time?
Matt, yeah, many more stories surfacing at this time, brother. There are some hot and spicy stuff. We will discuss that as usual off camera, and but there are lots of other hot and spicy stuff that you will be hearing very soon about court matters here, there, and things that the public ought to know. We will be bringing them, we will be revealing them within the next few days, so the public will be made aware of that.
All right, caller, thank you very much. We will come back. When we come back, we'll be talking to Lennox Linton.
Crystal Waters Blue Skies, a platform for creative discussion. Live on Cube. Crystal Waters Blue Skies, a platform for creative discussion. Live on Cube.
We're back here, Dominica. We're talking to the opposition leader, Mr. Lennox Linton. Mr. Lennox Linton, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning to you, Matt Peltier. Good morning to the people of Marigot and Concord, the people of Dominica at home and abroad. It's a special joy and honor to join you today on September 15th, International Day for Democracy around the world. And as you may know, Matt, the United Nations is observing this year the theme, Democracy and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I don't know if you recall, in September last year, the 193 member states of the United Nations adopted what they call the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It was a plan for achieving a better future for all, laying out a path over 15 years to end extreme poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and protect the planet. At the heart of that agenda are the Sustainable Development Goals, which call for mobilizing efforts to end all forms of poverty, fight inequalities, and tackle climate change while ensuring that no one is left behind. The United Nations says that the new goals result from a process that has been more inclusive than ever, with governments involving business, civil society, and citizens from the outset. Now the task of implementing and monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals requires states to work in close partnership with civil society. Parliaments in particular have a critical role in translating the new Sustainable Development Agenda into concrete action through passing legislation, making budget allocations, and holding governments accountable. Ban Ki-moon, speaking at the Interparliamentary Union's 4th World Conference recently, he commended parliamentarians of the world for the invaluable role they played in shaping the new framework. He also underscored that their contribution to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda will be equally critical. A quote here: "People will look to you to hold your governments accountable for achieving the goals and to write the laws and invest in the programs that will make them a reality," end of quote. And he noted that democratic principles also run through the entire document. They were discussing like a silver thread. Sustainable Development Goal 16, Matt, addresses democracy by calling for inclusive and participatory societies and institutions. It aims to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and to build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. The goal is both an end in itself and a crucial part of delivering sustainable development in all countries. It has been seen by many commentators as a transformational goal and a key to ensuring that the agenda can be accomplished. And I'm happy to make these observations and to refer to this release from the United Nations on International Day for Democracy. As we here in Dominica face a deepening and widening threat to our democracy. And by the way, have you heard anything of like this coming from the government in terms of our UN representation and so on? Did you know last year that these Sustainable Development Goals have been put in place for 2030? Did anybody represent?
I haven't heard any discussion in that regard.
Anything of that nature?
No, I haven't heard.
Okay. And Matt, for a number of years now, we have been grappling with a threat to our democracy. A threat that is embedded in the style and the commitment of the Dominica Labour Party to interfere with the integrity of elections in Dominica. Elections, as you know, free and fair elections are the backbone of our democracy. This democracy that we'd like to celebrate with free societies all around the world. The backbone to that is the people's choice, the free choice that the people make of a government that will run their affairs over a period of time, and the relationship they have with that government in terms of being able to express themselves, in terms of being able to give feedback, in terms of being able to say to their government, in the term that the government has been asked, the party has been asked to lead government, that they don't like this or they don't like that, and to practice democracy, to have the joy of the freedom of the human spirit that allows you to be a decent global citizen, where you conduct your affairs without lying, without cheating, without stealing. You're honest in your engagements, and you follow all the Christian principles that you were taught growing up. What we have been seeing over years is elections tainted by irregular practices, where we see lying, where we see cheating, where we see stealing of the elections. And when you steal elections, you cannot have a proper platform for the practice of democracy and for achieving the greatest good for the greatest number, as we are committed to do in these democratic societies. I'm sharing with you today, Matt Peltier, the position of the United Workers' Party on electoral reform, which we communicated to the to the Electoral Commission, the Independent Electoral Commission, on the 18th of August 2016. We have not received a response to that communication, and we felt that the time has come when, as we have shared with the Independent Commission, we must also share with the people of Dominica what is it we are asking for specifically when we talk about electoral reform. Dominica, I should remind you, is supposed to be joined with the rest of the world in paying attention to elections with integrity. And the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, who now chairs the Global Commission on Elections, Democracy and Security, when they issued their 2012 report, he made the observation, and I want to quote him here, that elections are the indispensable root of democracy. But to be credible, we need to see high standards before, during, and after votes are cast. Opposition organizations must be free to organize and to campaign without fear. There must be a level playing field among candidates. On polling day, voters must feel safe and trust the secrecy and integrity of the ballot. When the electorate believes that elections have been free and fair, they can be a powerful catalyst for better governance, greater security, and human development. But in the absence of credible elections, citizens have no recourse to peaceful political change. The risk of conflict increases while corruption, intimidation, and fraud go unchecked, rotting the entire political system slowly from within. End of quote. That's former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. And like I said, this concern about the necessity for electoral integrity as a foundation for our democracy is something we share with the rest of the free world. In that report, it is noted that elections with integrity are important to values that we hold dear, human rights, and democratic principles. Elections give life to rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, including freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of peaceful assembly and association, the right to take part in the government of one's country through freely elected representatives, the right of equal access to the public service in one's country, and the recognition that the authority of government derives from the will of the people, expressed in genuine periodic elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage and shall be held by secret ballot. And when the commission, the Global Commission on Elections, Democracy and Security, talks about elections of integrity, they define it as an election with integrity as any election that is based on the democratic principles of universal suffrage and political equality as reflected in international standards and agreements, and is professional, impartial, and transparent in its preparation and administration throughout the electoral cycle. There are 5 challenges, major challenges to elections of integrity that have been identified around the world. They include building the rule of law to substantiate claims to human rights and electoral justice. Number 1, building professional, competent electoral management bodies like our Electoral Commission here, with full independence of action to administer elections that are transparent and merit public confidence. 3, creating institutions and norms of multi-party competition and division of power that bolster democracy as a mutual security system among political contenders. Removing barriers, legal, administrative, political, economic, and social, to universal and equal political participation. And 5th, regulating uncontrolled, undisclosed, and opaque political finance. When we in Dominica, the level of the parliamentary opposition, the United Workers' Party, speak about electoral reform, we are not talking about some academic exercise that needs to be pursued for the love of the academic exercise. We're talking about the necessity of safeguarding our democracy and ensuring that the systems in place for election ensure that we'll have transparent, fair elections with integrity that can reliably serve as the platform, the root of our democracy in Dominica. And so for years, we have been talking about free and fair elections in Dominica. We have been talking about electoral reform. A few weeks ago, we put our position before the Electoral Commission. That was after a lot of talk, series of engagements around the country, and the worsening situation regarding the conduct of elections in Dominica. The letter is dated the 18th of August 2016. It's addressed to the chairman, Dominica Electoral Commission, Turkey Lane, Rosa, Dominica. Dear sir, re-electoral reform. In its provisions for the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms in this democratic society, our Constitution confers on the Electoral Commission the duty to ensure free and fair elections for the good and just governance of the Commonwealth of Dominica. According to Section 38 of the Constitution, quote, the Electoral Commission shall be responsible for the registration of voters for the purpose of electing representatives and for the conduct of elections of representatives and senators, and shall have such powers and other functions relating to such registration elections as may be prescribed by law. This clear assignment of responsibility for the conduct of a voting system that secures the integrity and credibility of choosing a government of the people, by the people, for the people, goes to the heart and soul of our democracy and is not to be taken lightly. Since 2005, the United Workers' Party has been advocating for electoral reform along the lines of improvement recommendations in post-election reports from the Chief Elections Officer and observer missions from CARICOM, the OAS, and the Commonwealth. The Electoral Commission, acting in its own deliberate judgment, decided to pursue much-needed reform of the electoral process in order to effectively protect it from undue influence, bribery, voter fraud, and corrupt election practices. Since that decision by the Commission, acting independently as mandated by the Constitution, the Commission has conducted 2 general elections, 2009 and 2014, under the same electoral system it determined is in need of reform. In 2013, we in the parliamentary opposition were consulted by the Honorable Mia Motley QC of Barbados in the course of an electoral commission assignment to revise the electoral laws to facilitate voter re-registration and the utilization of voter ID cards. While we have heard nothing further of that assignment, we trust that the legislative review has been completed to the satisfaction of the Commission. As the Commission must be aware, there has been growing public concern over the failure to implement the reforms, especially given the abuses and corrupt practices that the ruling Dominica Labour Party has engaged to win the last 3 general elections in violation of the voter eligibility, bribery, and treating provisions of our electoral laws. We hereby request urgent action to complete the process of electoral reform that the Commission decided on in the public interest more than 8 years ago. For the avoidance of doubt, electoral reform necessitates decisive action from the Commission in the following areas. Area number 1, an accurate register of voters, which means a total re-registration of all eligible voters on the basis of which a new register of voters will be issued. cleaning the list of electors is a critical component of electoral reform. A bloated list that includes, despite prohibitions in law to the contrary, the names of dead people and people living outside of Dominica for over 5 years is and will continue to be used to corrupt the voting process. The opposition believes a total re-registration is the best way to clean the list. This has successfully been done in neighboring island states over relatively short periods of 6 months or less. All re-registrations must be done by the Commission exclusively in Dominica and must be subject to the existing residency criteria for voter registration. We urge the Commission to determine the enabling legislative amendments that will be necessary to facilitate re-registration and complete the re-registration exercise by the end of the first quarter of 2017. Number 2, voter identification cards. Picture ID cards for all eligible voters on the new registered voters who will be obligated to use the cards as identification during elections. The Electoral Commission embarked on issuing a multi-purpose identification card for voting to registered electors in 2016. 3 years later, notwithstanding the publicized inventory of 100,000 cards, no ID cards for voting have been issued. All ID cards for voting must be issued by the Commission exclusively in Dominica. We urge the Commission to determine the enabling legislative amendments that will be necessary to facilitate mandatory voting with ID cards and complete the issuing of voter ID cards by the end of the first quarter of 2017. Number 3, the rule of law. Enforcement of the provisions in our electoral laws against bribery, cheating, impersonation, illegal voting, and election offenses in general. The last 3 elections in Dominica have increasingly featured the corrupt practices of bribery and treating overseas and local voters, eligible and ineligible, to cast ballots for the Dominica Labour Party. We have seen the valuable consideration of huge sums spent on airline and ferry tickets to corruptly influence the votes of overseas-based nationals. We have seen huge sums spent on bringing in foreign artists to provide free entertainment to corruptly influence votes. This has happened under the watch of an electoral commission that refuses to act to prevent fraudulent manipulation of the electoral system, even though it is fully aware of the applicable laws against these practices. Section 55 of the House of Assembly Elections Act is crystal clear that the following persons shall be deemed guilty of bribery within the meaning of the Act. 1. Every person who directly or indirectly by himself or by any other person on his behalf gives, lends, or agrees to give or lend or offers promises to procure or to endeavor to procure any money or valuable consideration to or for any elector or to or for any person on behalf of any elector or to or for any other person in order to induce any elector to vote or to refrain from voting, or corruptly does any such act as mentioned above on account of any elector having voted or refrained from voting an election, is guilty of bribery. Section 56 of the Act says the following persons shall be deemed guilty of treating within the meaning of the Act. And it says every person who corruptly, by himself, or by any other person, either before, during, or after an election, directly or indirectly, gives or provides or pays wholly or in part the expenses of giving or providing any food, drink, entertainment, or provision to or for any person for the purpose of corruptly influencing that person or any other person to vote or restrain from voting at the election or on account of that person or any other person having voted or refrained from voting at the election is guilty of treating. Section 59 of the House of Assembly Elections Act provides that every person who is guilty of bribery, cheating, under the provisions of this act, is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $5,000 or to imprisonment for 6 months. Section 51 provides that every person who is convicted of bribery, cheating, shall, in addition to any other punishment, be incapable during a period of 7 years from the date of conviction, A, of being registered as an elector or voting at any election of a member of the House of Assembly, or B, of being elected as a member of the House of Assembly, or if elected before his conviction, of retaining his seat as such member. The pernicious proposition of destroying votes of conscience and handing the choice of governance in a democracy over to the highest bidders and the most able purchasers of influence signals the beginning of the end of Dominica as a sovereign democratic republic. We urge the Commission to constrain whoever it may concern to honor the rule of our electoral laws and to guard against any attempts to amend specific provisions of these laws for the purpose of legitimizing the bribery, cheating, and ineligible voting practices that are increasingly corrupting the electoral process. Number 4, voting by electors living overseas. Lawful facilitation of registered eligible voters living overseas to vote in general elections in Dominica. The practice of a political party paying millions of dollars from undisclosed sources to transport thousands of voters from overseas locations to vote is illegal, corrupt, and represents the most dangerous obstacle to free and fair elections. We urge the Commission to set up effective arrangements for registered eligible voters resident overseas willing to participate in elections to vote online from their various locations. Number 5, media access for the opposition. Fair access for the opposition to the news and current affairs programs of all state-owned, state-operated, or state-controlled media. In Nevis in 2012, a High Court decision upheld by the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal overturned an election result, partly because of the failure to grant the opposition access to state media breached the right to freedom of expression. In Dominica, we continue with the long-standing corrupt practice of denying the opposition access to state media funded by the public purse. We urge the Commission to support equal access to the news and current affairs programming on DBS Radio, Mapping Television, and the Government Information Service for both sides of the Dominica Parliament with immediate effect. Number 6, campaign finance reform. To ensure, at the very least, declarations of campaign contributions and election campaign spending by any political party of no more than $30 EC per registered voter per election. The fact that 2 elections have been held since the Commission's independent decision to pursue electoral reform with no real progress on this extremely important undertaking gives the impression that the Commission is ensuring that no electoral reform will be completed in time for any election while the Dominica Labour Party remains in office. We hope that this is not the case, and going forward, the Commission will act expeditiously in this matter in the enlightened public interest of our beloved Dominica.
Lennox Linton, at least a request there, and this is not the first time from the opposition to the Electoral Commission. This is not the first time, Lennox Linton, that we're hearing of such requests, asking for immediate reforms at the Electoral Commission. What guarantees, if any, that do you have right now, Mr. Linton, that what you've asked for will become a reality?
I have no guarantees, Matt. But this is not a matter for the individual members on the Electoral Commission or the individual members of the government to decide. This is a matter for the people of Dominica. It is the people of Dominica who must, in their own enlightened self-interest, demand that there be electoral reforms to protect the democracy of Dominica. And so the reason for talking with you this morning and engaging with the public through this is to let the message be heard loud and clear, far and wide, that the democracy of Dominica is increasingly threatened by the electoral practices of the Dominica Labour Party, those that they're seeking to entrench, those that they have used, the irregularities they've used over the past 2-3 election cycles, and what they are continuing to do with impunity more and more as time goes by. So, no, I have no assurance that the Commission will act. But we engage with the Commission. The Commission has a duty under the Constitution to give the people of Dominica elections that have integrity. And in fact, if you go back in time, you will see in 2008 where the Commission acting independently actually decided that it was going to reform the electoral process. And having done that, the Commission, then under the chairmanship of the same Gerard Burton, who is the chairman now, came under the radar, under the scrutiny of the government as a target for manipulation. You have heard this letter, this email read before, Matt, but I don't think we can read it often enough because it is the single biggest, most powerful piece of evidence of the manipulation of the Electoral Commission, the Independent Electoral Commission that the Labour Party is committed to. March 27th, 2008, Anthony Astafan, subject urgent to Roosevelt Skerrit, copy to Alec Lawrence, and copy to Hartley Henry. Brother, please do not drift too far. Tried calling you again today and just cannot get through. I spoke to Kondwani this morning. Kondwani is Kondwani Williams, a lawyer in private practice, and at the time, still is a member of the Electoral Commission nominated by the government, by the Dominica Labour Party. There is madness going on at the Commission. You need to call in Richard and Kondwani. Richard is Richard Charles. He has since disappeared from the Commission to make way for Alec Lawrence, and we'll come to that in a moment. I leave today. These guys, meaning the members of the Independent Electoral Commission, are talking about reforms to include ID cards and complete re-registration. You see how long ago that was? 2008. Such reforms will undermine your re-election legacy, as the opposition will say, the Commission agreed with us. Reform was required because of widespread fraud. That's Anthony Astafan. He was aware, then it would seem, he is the one referring to widespread fraud. He was the one who wanted to protect the re-election legacy from opposition observations that the reforms were necessary because they needed to halt fraud. That was the 27th of March. On the 28th of April, the same year, remember March, April, 27th of March, 28th of April, 2008, so 1 month later, Alec Lawrence is now a member of the Commission. He wasn't a member on March the 28th, but he was copied in the correspondence from Anthony Astafan to Roosevelt Skerrit. Also copied was Hartley Henry. That March 27th correspondence asked for Richard Charles and Kondwani to be called in. So Richard Charles and Kondwani were obviously called in from the Commission on the evidence of this letter. Because lo and behold, 1 month later, on the 28th of April, Alec Lawrence is writing to his comrades, the same ones involved in the March 27th correspondence. Roosevelt Skerrit, he's writing to Roosevelt Skerritt and to Tony and Company. Hi, comrades. I am due to attend my first commission meeting on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Although due to a mediation at 10, I'm only able to spend an hour there. I see from the document sent to me that the commission has taken a decision to introduce a new voter registration system before the next election. So before this gentleman came on the commission, he himself has confirmed that before he arrived there, the commission had arrived at a decision to introduce a new voter registration system before the next election. The election was in 2009. I have, Alec Lawrence says, serious reservations about this and would like to have a chat with you about it. Why do you have reservations about something so honorable, something so noble, something so necessary for Dominica? I would prefer not to do so via email. So let's meet in person now to discuss. Then he addresses Tony. Tony, I understand that such a new system was introduced in St. Kitts, St. Lucia, and possibly St. Vincent. Can you get for me tomorrow info on how long the implementation process took in these islands? You see what we're dealing with, Matt? This correspondence talking about the length of time it took in other islands to re-register voters and to have ID cards, in principle, is 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. 8 years later, we don't have the reforms. We don't have the re-registration. We don't have the ID cards. And this man who was concerned about implementation time has been sitting on the commission for 8 years, having been brought there, obviously, to stall electoral reform, to ensure that it didn't happen in time for the election of 2009. You see what he said? I have reservations about this being introduced before the next election, which was 2009. I have reservations about it. He made sure his reservations held, and he made sure his reservation held again 5 years later in 2014. What are they doing now? Nobody knows, which is why we have sent this letter. But we haven't received a response to the letter. Since the 18th of August, there's been no acknowledgement of the letter. There's been no response. But we understand that the commission is busy dealing with the proposals that the government has made to amend the electoral laws, essentially to set aside the irregularities that people have been complaining about in terms of bribery, in terms of treating, in terms of illegal overseas voting and so on, that have been corrupting these elections for years. So now they want to amend the laws to legitimize the bribery they've been doing, the treating they've been doing, and the other irregularities which have been corrupting the process. So you will no longer be able to take them to court for treating. You'll not be able to go to tell them about bribery. They're fixing themselves up in the revised version of the legislation. And I understand the commission is in agreement with these amendments to the laws. Matt Peltier, on the 31st of August, 2016, the supervisor of elections in the Turks and Caicos Islands warned against treating. I will read the release because it's particularly important to where we are now. Political campaigning is well underway for the yet to be announced general elections in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And the supervisor of elections would like to remind candidates, political parties, or anyone associated with them of the need to comply with the provisions of the election ordinance, and in particular, what is expected by virtue of Section 70 of the said ordinance, which reads, and as you listen to this, you'd remember I read something a while ago that sounds very similar. Every person who corruptly by himself or by any other person, either before, during, or actually after the election, directly or indirectly gives or provides, pays wholly or in part the expenses or giving or providing of any food, drink, entertainment, or provision to or for any person for the purpose of corruptly influencing that person or any other person to vote or to refrain from voting at such election, or on account of such person or any other person having voted or refrained from voting at such election, and this behavior known as treating is illegal. So that's what the supervisor of elections in the Turks and Caicos is warning the parties over there about. The supervisor also explained that treating has been illegal for many years, although in past campaigning leading up to general elections, some people have chosen to ignore it. And such behavior, he said, is no longer being ignored. The person offering this kind of inducement is committing a serious criminal offense, and so is any member of the public who accepts a gift or cash. The supervisor has also warned that he will follow up on all reports received and will not hesitate to collaborate with the police to initiate criminal investigation. The supervisor of elections in the Turks and Caicos Islands holds a similar position to the chief elections officer in Dominica. So you have a chief elections officer here, you have a supervisor of elections. They're the same. You read the provision on treating, it's the same from all laws. Political party leaders and candidates, continuing the release, should make it known throughout their organization or campaign machinery of the need to comply with the law so as to uphold the law and ensure a level playing field between campaigns in the best interest of voters in the Turks and Caicos Islands. In Dominica, what do you have? You seem to have a continuing practice where the Electoral Commission continues to carry out the mandate, the wishes of the Dominica Labour Party. And when you examine in particular the role and function of Alec Lawrence, when you examine that back in 2008, Kondwani Williams was called in of Richard Charles. I don't know if they were calling together or separately, but Richard Charles got the boot so that Alec Lawrence would come in, and it would appear that Kondwani Williams would have stayed there because, according to the Labour Party was satisfied that he identified with the role and function that Alec was coming in to perform. And so when they had the opportunity to change chairman or suggest a change of chairman the next round, that Gerard Burton, who was part of the original decision to have electoral reform, but has done nothing about it for more than 8 years. You have to say that Gerard Burton too has come on board with these stalling tactics, this defer, this delay that Alec Lawrence has masterminded so very well. Why is he doing that? Alec Lawrence is a lawyer, the senior counsel. I'm told he doesn't do much legal work these days. He's more involved in the sale of Dominica's passports. As an agent, he makes a commission on the sale of the passports. And now he's also in the developer business where the money he facilitates to raise for Dominica, he can also get some of that money to build his own hotel. He doesn't have to pay anybody back any interest. So here's a man who, just based on the way he has been facilitated with the sale of Dominica's citizenship as a key beneficiary involved in that, would want the Labour Party to remain in office forever and ever, amen. I'm told that in the case of Kondwani Williams, there are family interest in the sale of Dominica passports and citizenship and so on to protect. Gerard Burton may have similar kinds of interests. I hear lawyers these days are very, very much interested in getting their share too of the passport millions. And the question is, what is going on? Who do the people of Dominica hold accountable for the fact that to date they have no electoral reform and the commission is unable to present to the public a time frame in which this electoral reform exercise will be completed? Do you realize, Matt, that for years now we've been talking about ID cards, we've been talking about rolling out ID cards, but years have gone by and not one single ID card for voting has been issued. 2 elections have come and gone. Is it a question of money? It cannot be a question of money. The government of Dominica left on the table last year $146 million that it said it didn't need to use last year. $146 million. So on a vital matter like electoral reform and financing the requirements of electoral reform, how can there be any credible argument that we did not have money? So it's not a money issue. So what is it? It's a capacity issue? Is it that we don't have staff? No, it cannot be that we don't have staff because we have employed significant numbers of people in a national employment program. Thousands of people have been given money around Dominica. Sometimes they don't have no job. They haven't got anything to do. They're in some person's place as an apprentice, or they're holding on, they're marking time. What is the problem of properly staffing the commission to ensure that you have the capacity to get the work that needs to be done completed on the electoral reform agenda? It doesn't matter how we look at it. We see clearly that this is a deliberate ploy on the part of the government, facilitated by the Electoral Commission, to deny the people of Dominica electoral reform, elections of integrity, and safeguards therein for our democracy in Dominica.
Well, I'll tell you what, our time is almost coming to an end there, but I'm going to give Lennox Linton, our callers, and many listeners out there, a chance to engage you at 1 o'clock if you have that time. Do you have the time, Lennox Linton?
Yes, Matt Peltier.
All right,
I
so
will make myself available. Remember that we are starting again another round of public education designed to explain to the people of Dominica why we cannot have another election in this country without electoral reform. That's the necessity of it. There are people who are going to say, oh, you all are talking too much. We will talk for the next few weeks, but we will act. A time is going to come when we will call out our supporters and we'll call out the people of Dominica who are interested in protecting their democracy to demonstrate that that is where their hearts and minds are.
So it's a case of electoral reform or else?
It's a case of electoral reform. My position is very simple. We cannot have another election in Dominica without reforms that civilized societies around the world have implemented very easily and without difficulty over the last 5 to 10 years in particular. Dominica is lagging behind, and Dominica is lagging behind in the corrupt interest of the Dominica Labour Party, and that cannot be allowed to stand.
Listen at 1 o'clock. We'll take your questions there. Let's take one question. Hello.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
It was very interesting listening to the leader of the opposition, bringing the side of the opposition that they are trying to propose to the Electoral Commission. Likewise, the government made their own proposal. So what I am getting from it, that it is not because the leader of the opposition make a point that the Electoral Commission is going to accept everything that he says. It is a matter for the Electoral Commission to consider and decide how they are going. Now, the very famous thing that I've been hearing about the letter and the email between Tony Estefans and Lennox Lawrence, a very important thing I did not hear is the fact that Lennox Lawrence, when he was appointed, pointed out to them that when the Electoral Commission made the decision, no member representing the Labour Party was present at that meeting. You remember that?
I'm following you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I am saying that the Electoral Commission, as a commission, has a right to review the decision. And what will be necessary and important is the merit of the decision, not the fact, because I hear the leader of the opposition keep saying that they made a decision, but I am saying that the decision was made without the input of the members of the Labour Party.
Oh, let me hear Lennox Linton quickly on this one there.
Matt, I'm only going by what Mr. Lawrence himself communicated to his colleagues, in which he was involved in a kind of a COPLO. You know what a COPLO is, Matt? Mm-hmm. The COPLO was March 27th, that email from Tony Estefan to Skerrit, copied to him, Alec Lawrence, and to Hartley Henry, the political advisor to Mr. Skerrit. When Mr. Alec Lawrence, shortly thereafter, was installed on the commission as the government's nominee to replace Richard Charles, before he attended his first meeting, he confirmed that he had seen documents which were sent to him to facilitate his participation in the meeting. And he said, I see from the documents sent to me that the commission has taken a decision to introduce a new voter registration system before the next election. That's all that there is in this correspondence. If the caller was told by Alec Lawrence that the decision of the commission did not involve the votes of the members of the government side,
the Labour
representatives, I don't know anything about that. What Mr. Lawrence has reported is a commission decision, and commission decisions are majority decisions.
All right, caller, and we'll continue at 1 o'clock. Stick around. This is
Thank you very much, Mark. God bless you.
See you at 1 o'clock, Lennox. Thank you very much.
Madam Razad, silte iskino. Yali oti doctor, they take 2 tablets every 6 hours. Yali po 6 tablets every 2 hours. Ambulance ki wamasi, iti got chime. When she recovered yodi from no one, you go to quick care pharmacy kote Halsbro. La yoke espiche tout bite bawa. La iwive la, idiyo, you that is quick care? Yodi yes, ma'am, quick care. Every type of personalized service. It tell ma satisfy. La iwiwe kaili di mawi. I get dependable, knowledgeable, trustable, and supportable service. Ma we di yes, that is a big table. I gadi avec di Howard Juju cafe ve mwen. If you no honey, go and take your medicine. Yes, Quick Care Pharmacy Kote Halsbro. Service you can trust for all your prescription and over-the-counter drugs. He can, she can, they all can testify about the professionalism and benefits Kote Quick Care Pharmacy.